Welcome everyone to the March 2016 beginning of this year's Nuts and Bolts program, and this is session 1, which is the overview. This may take a little bit over an hour or an hour. We did this last year. It was a little bit over an hour, and I have a couple more slides to present, so it may take a little bit more than an hour, but we'll get through it as quickly as we can. So welcome everyone. This is, let's see if I can get to the next screen. Okay, our agenda is to give everyone an introduction and an overview of our family education program. And that's one component of our Step 2 program. It's in 3 components. It's the trustee training, and that's what we call the trustee training preview in this session. I'm also going to give you a client orientation meeting summary. The reason being that that is the best way to get introduced and to explain to both helpers and clients who haven't really had the talk for quite some time what the purpose of the program is and how it leads into estate settlement and all of that. And then for your entertainment, I'm going to tell you a story called The Werewolf Workshop. We'll get to that, but it's really an illustration of what estate settlement is, something about what it's like. Okay, so it's going to be about approximately one hour. Can everyone see the GoToMeeting side panel that's on?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. If you have questions, I'm not going to suggest that. I'm not going to make you use the chat box in this session. But if you do have questions, just unmute yourself and hop in, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Okay, let me go over the current training resources. There are this year 4 webinars, 2 in the spring and 2 in the fall, 1 today, 1 on April 19th, and 1 on September 13th, and 1 on October 4th. We have our website, and I want to go over that a little bit at the moment. So if you will allow me, I'm going to get out of that screen and go into the website. So this is how you get to our website. You go to heritagedesignlaw.com. That brings you here. You scroll down to the client sign-in button. That directs you to this sign-in sheet, and you type in STEP, S-T-E-P, space 2, and then the password is member with a pre-cap M, capital M-E-M-B-E-R. And hopefully it's going to play with me today. So then you click on Login, and it takes you to the Step 2 Program Resource Center. And this is really the place where particularly helpers can get a lot of information. It helps with the whole program. It's really the kind of structure that we use to convey information and give people resources. So, you know, we have a lot of documents for download. We have, for overview, and we have the Step 2 Year in Review, which is a document that shows what the Step 2 program is really all about for the whole year. I'll just click on that so you can see it. It's really a calendar of the whole year. It looks like this. So it talks about how the whole program works. If people want to understand that. We have our 2016 calendar of events. We have an annual client meeting registration form if you lost it from the welcome letter that Alicia sent out to you. We have our current Step 2 program member agreement if you've lost that or you want to check out what that looks like. Particularly if you're a helper and you want to see what the Step 2 program member agreement is like. The investment summary is the summary of what people, how people choose to pay their fees. Then we have the client commitments that everybody has signed and the law firm commitments. And we're having right now we're in the funding part of the program, and we need to get our funding updates by the end of this year, unless you're in the process of doing your funding now. So we have instructions for those that people can download in the new asset form. And then the 2015 annual client material meetings, when we've had our annual client meetings this year, there'll be the 2016 annual client meeting materials. We'll probably keep last year's materials online as well. Many people want to know what the stories are that we use for teaching, and we have a summary of all the stories and the key concepts that they cover. And then it's one key to estate settlement is actually having the information as a beneficiary or as someone who is a helper about what you're supposed to do first. So we have some information here about the, what to do when a loved one passes away, some common concerns that people have, and then the diagram of what the transfer process looks like for both a taxable and a non-taxable estate. So then we have the nuts and bolts classes. I'm going to be putting this one up once we're finished with it. It's recorded. And then at the bottom of the screen, there is a place where helpers, if they want to be on our mailing list, can register, putting in their email, their telephone number, and some comments, etc. So that's our website, and a lot of people forget that we have all of these resources on the website, and it's really very easy to get to. Just go to heritagedesignlaw.com. You'll see my lovely face there, and then click on the client sign-in. So let me continue on with our presentation. So that's the website. Another website that's really important is something called lifespan.com. That is a website that is the website of a component of the national network called the Lifespan program. There's about 5 or 6 law firms that are in that program, and they are the progenitors of the 3-step strategy. And Rick Randall, who's the chairman of the network, is also the person who founded that program. And so a lot of the educational materials that we can reference are on the Lifespan website. So you can go to that website, you can sign in, it's really easy to sign in. It asks you who it is that you're a guest of, and all you have to do is say Heritage Design Law Group or Frank L. Bridges, and then you'll be directed to the educational materials. And there's one particular program that I'll be talking about tonight that would be easy to access that way. So for the family education program, there's really 3 elements. The first element is the one that we've been doing the longest. That's the wealth transfer training. That's for disability and for estate settlement. A newer component of this is wealth reception planning training, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. A third component, of course, is the supporting the people who are involved in wealth reception, and that we've gotten involved in too. And so I'll explain what wealth reception is in a few minutes so that it's a little bit easier for people to understand. One of the basic tenets of the National Network, which I'm a member, is the concepts of Nancy Klein, who wrote 2 books, one called Time to Think, and the second one, which is an adaptation of the first one, an expansion called More Time to Think. And she developed a bunch of ideas about how we can get people in a meeting to actually think instead of just participating, interrupting each other. And she developed some methodologies that allow people to do their best thinking in a meeting. One of the concepts that she developed is the concept of limiting assumptions. In other words, we come to a meeting or we come to a topic and we have assumptions about what we can do and what we can't do. So in this context, the law firm, in the estate planning context, a law firm typically has the limiting assumption that we only get one chance to see you when you come in to do your planning with us, and then you go away, and hopefully you'll come back to update at some point. And this is the traditional method, but many people don't. They often go on, etc., or they can't find the lawyer that they did their plan with originally. For the helpers and receivers of the wealth, that's the beneficiaries, they have the limiting assumption that the experience, they're going to have a negative experience talking with the creators of their inheritance about death and disability, and that if they do, they're going to appear greedy to discuss the assets and what they want. So, those are limiting assumptions that actually prevent people from doing what we think is necessary to make plans work, because in our view, most plans don't work, and our business is to make sure that we help people with plans that work. So then she also developed the concept of liberating incisive questions. So for the law firm, one of the questions that the network confronted was, well, what would you do if you knew that the helpers and receivers would see the benefit of active planning participation? What kind of program would you develop? How would you set up your practice? What would the relationship between you and your clients be? And that's really where the three-step strategy came from, and it's really where the education program is based. And then for helpers and receivers, the question is, what would you do if you knew that the plan creators valued a smooth transition, and that advanced discussion of what's supposed to happen is the key to a smooth transition? Most of our clients, as a matter of fact, all of our clients really go into planning with the idea that what they want to do is to establish a system where their heirs and their people that they leave behind will have a smooth transition to life after their life. So that's where the family education program came from, among other things. And so in the wealth transfer training, we actually have 3 nuts and bolts programs. That's tonight's program, the nuts and bolts overview. Nuts and bolts number 2, which is the estate settlement or death settlement. That's going to be occurring on April 19th. Nuts and bolts number 3, which is disability settlement, and that's for successor trustees and healthcare representatives. And that's on September 13th. And finally, the last one is nuts and bolts number 4, and this is the program that is fundamentally based on wealth reception planning, and it's directed to your helpers and beneficiaries, and essentially it's how to maximize the value of your inheritance, because they're going to be receiving their inheritance in accordance with a plan that our clients have put together in a certain way, and they need to understand how that works, what their role in it is, and what the flexibilities are, how flexible it is for them, and how it integrates with their own planning. That'll be on October 4th. So the goals for the program really in most cases are that we want to make it smoother and easier for those that follow, as I said. So I'm going to give you now a preview of what occurs in the trustee training workshops and what it's really all about. So, the fundamental thing is that we approach this whole planning process from the point of view it's not about the documents. And so many people come to the planning process, they have a lot of initial excitement. They understand about the education and all of that. So everybody's excited, including the advisors and the clients and the people that are being planned for. But most people aren't aware of what we call the parking lot rule. And the parking lot rule is that as soon as you leave a meeting and you're on your way to the parking lot, almost immediately large amounts of the information that you've picked up at the meeting begin to fall away. So that by the time you get to the parking lot and get into your car, you remember about 1/3, 20% to 1/3 of what you actually heard in the meeting. That's what we call the parking lot rule. And I know that's true about me. When I go to meetings, unless I actually take the presentation with me and a bunch of notes, by the time I get to the parking lot, a lot of what I've heard is out the window. As a matter of fact, the reason sometimes I think I have 2 ears is so that the information can go in one ear and go out the other. Now, we used to do these trainings, and we would give a lot of information, but we would hand it out in terms of paper. We would hand paper out. But we found that really didn't work very well either. And so what we try to do is we try to present the value of what we have or what we can present to clients, and therefore the fees based on our counseling. So the parking lot rule is all about trying to repeat and have people have the opportunity to hear over and over again the information that they need for inheritance and helping with the estate settlement. So there are 4 goals really for our trustee training workshops, and of course the first is to know the law firm name and the contact information. The second is, and this is really very important, is to remember that there is a process, and it's the process that produces the results, so we should follow it. A lot of people, when they are confronted by estate settlement, it looks like a huge problem and a big issue, a lot of information that they don't know and don't understand. Well, we do have a process. That's really our job. Our job is to guide the family and the helpers through the process of estate settlement, and it's one step after the other. So if we concentrate on the process and one step after the other, we actually get the results that the creators of the plan intended. So we should follow it. We also want to give you an idea of what the types of issues are that you'll deal with as you go through the process of estate settlement. And also we'd like to encourage interest in participating in the planning that our clients have done. So those are our 4 goals. So here's the 911. When something happens, when somebody dies or becomes disabled suddenly, what do you do first? Well, you call the firm. You locate the helper's handbook. Actually, we call this the blue book in our system. You locate the client's red book, which is the book that has all of the documents that the clients executed. All their current documents are in the red book. There's a list of where all of the important documents are that's in the red book, other documents besides the estate planning documents. So it's a really central organizer for people who are trying to get started. But the first thing to do is call the law firm so we can help guide you through the process right up front. And then, of course, finally, it's to relax and remember that there is a dependable process to follow so that we can take things one step at a time. So we'd like to know what your goals are for the program. So, and we'd like all the helpers, and we'd like our clients to call us. Remember, you're all part of the first call program, so which means that we want you to call us first before you make a mistake or before you get confused. So give us a call. It's just all part of the program. We're not on the meter when you give us a call. Or send us a private email and let us know what's working and what's not working for you. So I'm going to start the next part of this by talking about a really kind of revolutionary study that was done by Allianz Insurance Company called the American Legacy Study. And what they did was they studied what was important for both the people in the older generation, what they thought was important, and what the people in the younger generation thought was important in terms of planning. So, a lot of people in the older generation think that the most important thing that their next generation is interested in is the money. And so their focus is often in that direction. But when we actually poll the next generation about what's important to them from the people that are going to, that aren't going to be here forever, the most important thing was the values and life lessons that they have been taught or that they learned from them. Second most important thing was instructions and wishes to be fulfilled. The third most important thing is the personal possessions of emotional value, and that's where a lot of probate contests historically have occurred, because mom's ring or dad's guitar ends up being the emotional contact that people have with mom or dad, and who has that becomes a big emotional issue, and everything else sort of follows along what happens to that. And then finally we get to the financial assets and the real estate. So if we actually poll the people who are the receivers of the wealth, this is typically and statistically based on the Allianz study, this is their set of priorities, starting with values and life lessons. So we have developed this idea of wealth reception planning for the receivers of wealth. And what that is a formal process designed to assure you and your loved ones that your true wealth, both financial and non-financial, is fully realized, efficiently transferred, and effectively received. So this is a lot of the education that we're dealing with is so that people understand how our clients' financial and non-financial wealth can be transferred and received effectively by the receivers of the wealth. So, and that's really what Nuts and Bolts 4 is about, how to maximize the benefit of your inheritance. We go into the kinds of things that our clients have considered in estate planning and talk about how those concepts actually apply to the beneficiaries of the client's planning so that they can understand a lot more about what's supposed to happen, how things actually work, if they have trustees, what the trustee's job is, if they're a trustee, what their job is, what their job is as a beneficiary, and the kinds of things that they can do as a beneficiary for their own planning purposes and also for income tax purposes. So there's a lot of issues that beneficiaries don't often learn about, and we think it's really important for them to do that. So last year we started doing that. We plan to do that every year. So now I'm going to give you a summary of the Truth About Estate Planning or client orientation meeting that we give when we talk to people when they begin their planning with us. And the reason for this is that it really has a complete explanation of why we have the Step 2 program, the purpose of the Step 2 program, what the theory of how our practice is designed to help our clients and their beneficiaries, receive, transfer, and receive their personal and financial wealth. And so it's really important to understand the overall picture. And it's also important if you've already had this talk or have been to a workshop at some point in the past, to have it repeated because, again, the parking lot rule does apply. And so we like to try to repeat this as often as we can so that people understand the concepts. So, essentially, our point of view is that most estate plans just don't work. And the reason that we say that is because of the snapshot test. And the snapshot test is, if you died and you went to heaven and you're looking down from the cloud up there, and you've got a snapshot of what you expect to happen. If you're doing your planning, you've got a snapshot of what you expect is going to happen. And so if you're looking down and everybody is actually doing what you expected to happen, then that's a plan that worked. But if you're looking down and things aren't happening the way you expected them to happen, well, that's not a plan that worked. The only problem is that when the activities are actually going on, you're not around to find out whether it actually worked or not. So part of this whole idea is that we want to make sure that we set up a system where you can have the comfort to know that things are actually going to work. So all of us have talked about the definition of estate planning, which has been developed by the founders of the National Network and has been essentially the same for many years. And it's, I want to control my property while I'm alive and well, plan for me and my loved ones if I become disabled, give what I have to whom I want, when I want, and the way that I want, all while assuring my wisdom is transferred along with the rest of my wealth. And a lot of people say, well, what wisdom do I have? Well, what we're really referring to there is your life's experience, the stories of your life, the story of the way your life has gone, things that you have learned that the people that come after you want to learn from you. And so your ability to transfer that wisdom is all part of what our planning really should be about. And of course, we have the planning pyramid, which sort of explains what the priorities are when we're doing the planning. So if we're doing the planning, what we want to do is, if it's a pyramid, the first person that's the most important person in the planning is the client, referred to there as me. So we need to get to know the client, everything that's important to them and what they want to do. Then that's followed by their family. And And then, you know, what we do most of the time in our practice is in estate planning, what lawyers do is they spend a lot of time in ways to preserve wealth. You know, first thing you want to make sure is they don't lose it. But if there's some way that people can expand wealth, then they'd like to find out about it. And that's where we begin to work with financial advisors on a collaborative basis. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid is saving taxes. Now, the traditional way of planning actually reverses that whole pyramid so that the first part of what people think about is saving taxes. And we don't think that's a really stable way for a plan to be built. So the planning period basically focuses on the client's goals. By doing so, it creates solutions that make planning easier and exposes to traditional planning. When I will say that I used to do this many years ago as kind of upside down. Now, the keys to an effective plan, what we've learned over time, first of all, are personalized counseling. And that's the key. That's the fundamental thing that we think makes our process a little bit different, is that we want to make sure that people get the counseling they need, because if they don't, then their plan really isn't going to work. The next most important key is proper asset ownership, and that's, in other words, how you own your property needs to line up with how your plan actually expects it to pass. And there should be a formal review process. Because, you know, you can do a great plan, you can do all the personalized counseling, you can do all the funding and get the proper asset ownership done. But, and, you know, if we did that 3 or 4 years ago, sure enough, there are going to be lots of changes in the law, changes in people's personal circumstances, and the result of that is that the plan is kind of out of date. So it's important to have a formal review process, which is really part of the Step 2 program. And then finally, there's a controlled transfer process. You know, it's important for the people who are actually going to be involved in the transfer process to know what to do, how to do it, and how to pay for it. And that's all stuff that they really need to know before they get started. Because, of course, once you get started in estate settlement, it's like the I Love Lucy conveyor belt where they just couldn't keep up with it. And, you know, if you walk into a lawyer's office and you don't know what to do and you don't know how to do it, they're going to quote you a fee and you're not going to know how to pay for it, and they've got you kind of over a barrel because you just don't know what's supposed to happen. So we believe that it's important for people to know what to do, how to do it, and how their fees are going to actually be structured. So because of all that, that's the purpose of the 3-step strategy. First step is to develop your plan with counseling-oriented planning partners. Second step is to commit yourself and your family to a formal and continuing maintenance and education program. That's our Step 2 program. And the third step is to secure appropriate assistance for you and your family to transfer your wisdom along with the rest of your wealth. Please note that the third step is not actually estate settlement. The third step is that you're supposed to secure appropriate assistance. In other words, put together the team of people that are going to actually implement your plan, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that shortly. So, you know, what we mean about counseling is that the traditional approach, when people come in to talk to an attorney, the attorney will say, what do you have? And they want to add it all up. People don't like to answer that question, but the fundamental reason why lawyers are doing that, and I could give you a longer explanation, is because they're trying to find out whether you're a married couple with under the federal estate tax threshold, a married couple with assets over the federal estate tax threshold, or an unmarried individual. And those are the 3 types of plans that most traditional attorneys have to put together. And so they're looking to figure out which template they're going to use in establishing the plan. And, you know, we all use word processors, and all word processors do have this kind of orientation, but we can't let that make us a captive. We need to be able to actually talk about the things that are outside of the tax field that are really important to our clients and their families. And those things are the personalized planning goals. Catastrophic illness protection, what happens when somebody becomes disabled, remarriage protection, creditor protections, divorce protections, and that's for the next generation beneficiaries. and values promotion. I'm not going to go into each one of these stories, but you know, one of the most important one is the third one, and that is the story of what happens when I die and my wife has an automobile accident. Of course, she's driving down the street. She gets distracted for a moment, and when she is not any longer distracted, she slams into a big yellow school bus. Channel 5 is out there with all the victims, and the question is, what happens to everything if I gave it to her outright? Well, then she's going to lose her entire inheritance from me. But if I left it to her in a way that she has access to it and effective control over it, but doesn't actually own it herself, that can be protected from the creditors that she has run into. So, and that's a really important part of understanding of what trusts are really all about. So, major part of it is creditor protection. Divorce protection is really just a kind of creditor protection. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but these are the kinds of things that are really counseling-oriented goals that people need to understand, and how they can approach these various different issues. So the second step is to commit yourself and your family to a formal and continuous maintenance and education program, and that is the Step 2 program. And that's basically designed around the fact that there are 3 types of change: changes in your personal situation, personal and financial, changes in the law, and we've had a lot of changes in the law, both tax and non-tax lately, and changes due to learning. In other words, we go away to our national network collegiums every 6 months, and as lawyers, we have learned a lot in the last 6 months, so we teach each other the kinds of lessons that we've learned, and we take them back to our clients for their planning. So there's a lot of changes that occur. We develop new processes, new concepts, new ways to deal with new issues that come up. For example, in today's estate planning world, with the $5 million plus exemption, you know, only about 0.5% or less of estates in the United States are actually going to have an estate tax. And so, you know, what's happening now is that people are really focusing on the income tax aspects of trusts and inheritance, and particularly basis step up and things like that. So there's a lot of developments, a lot of new concepts and that kind of stuff. And all of that ends up influencing how we help our clients do their planning. And I can hear somebody moving around there, so please be sure to try to muffle your sound. So the third step is to secure appropriate assistance for you and your family to transfer wisdom along with the rest of your wealth. And as I said, appropriate assistance, securing appropriate assistance doesn't happen when you die. It has to happen before you die. And the only way that you can secure appropriate assistance for is to identify the members of your family who are actually going to help and get them trained, so that way they can understand how to transfer, how you, what's supposed to happen and how your plan is supposed to work. So what does appropriate assistance really mean? Well, the first is controlled costs. So what are the aspects of controlled costs? Well, first of all, one of the keys to controlling costs is full funding. If assets are not, by that we mean titling the assets in the name of the trust or designating beneficiaries, so that all of how you own your assets is actually lined up with how your plan is supposed to work. If you have this wonderful trust and you end up holding things jointly, everything passes by joint survivorship and nothing passes through the trust, so the trust was a complete waste of time. The second aspect of controlling costs is proactive trustee and beneficiary training. There's a proactive engagement approach, which means, you know, mostly if you go to an attorney's office, not our office, but if you go to an attorney's office and say, how much are you going to charge me to settle my estate, they'll say, I don't know. And so, you know, one of the concepts that we have is that we like to have a proactive engagement approach. We have a commitment to our clients about what kind of estate settlement services we're going to offer and at what cost. I'll be going over that in a minute. And so we like to take this proactive approach rather than waiting until everything happens and everything is in chaos. So then, of course, the fourth one is successor trustees. Now, I want to make it clear that we have a contract that commits us to estate settlement services at a particular price, but our clients are not required to hire us. All right, it would be unethical for us to require families to hire us after the clients made this agreement with us, but it does provide that we're committed to offering our services for estate settlement based on a fixed price, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So then, talking about full disclosure, what are those charges? Well, there are several factors to overall cost. There's the cost of the documents, cost of updating or failing to update, and the cost at death. When people are typically looking for estate planning, all they think about is the cost of the documents or the upfront process. What we try to make people understand is that we should focus upon the overall cost of an estate plan, not just the upfront cost. So Paul Harvey used to talk about the rest of the story. Well, we talk about the rest of the fees. So estate settlement and administration for disability and death, death tax transfer, return preparation, and probate services. Those are the rest of the fees besides just the upfront fees that people need to be aware of and how they can control those. So traditionally, there have been many studies that show that around the country, the average cost of estate settlement, if it's done through probate, is 2 to 3% of the value of the assets, and that's not just the assets that are in the probate, but 2 to 3% of the assets that the person had an interest in. Even if there's just one asset that's in probate, that ends up being a probate cost, and typically it's 2 to 3%. Standard living trust planning estate settlement is 1.5 to 2.5%. Again, studies do show that. And in our heritage estate planning process, or using the three-step strategy, the overall cost, not just the upfront cost, not just the maintenance cost, and not just the estate settlement cost, should be between 1 and 2%. So again, that third one is distinguished from the first two bullet points in that this is a representation of the overall cost of a person's plan, not just the estate settlement. So for full disclosure, what we have is something called the Investment Selector Practice Evolver, and there's also the Heritage Design Cost Control System. So I'm going to show you the Practice Evolver right now, and this is what it looks like. Most recently, when we've met with clients about their planning, we've talked to them about how their fees are structured by using this particular model. So there are two real models for structuring our fees, and the first one is the fixed fee model. So at the beginning in the counseling and design process, that's based on 0.5 of 1% of the value of the assets. That's not a fixed fee equal to 0.5 of 1% of the assets. It's based on it, with a minimum of $3,500 and a maximum of $12,500. Then in the maintenance and education program, which is really the fulcrum of everything, the first year's cost for people is $995, and then years thereafter it's $595. And the $595 is a fee that does change. It used to be $495 for a few years, and we've recently had to up it because of the cost of overhead, but it's $595 a year. And what that involves is keeping sure that all of the funding is done correctly. We provide funding assistance, we educate the family, and we have our annual meetings, and we update the documents as well every other year. So if people have done that and followed that program and stayed in the maintenance program, and then they die, then the fee in our agreement is that we offer to provide estate settlement services with a cap of 1.25% of the value of the assets. That doesn't include the estate tax return, but that's the cap. However, if the family has been in and actually participated in the estate settlement, in the maintenance program, and by participating I mean that they have attended education events, and that's not a terrible That's not a very large problem, because if you've done it once in the last 3 years, well, that's fine, and you can do that online, as I showed you earlier. So if someone has participated in that, then the cap is reduced to 0.75%. So that's an incentive for helpers and inheritors of the wealth to actually participate in the program. The variable fee is the bottom line here. That's for people who don't want to actually commit to the whole program. It's based on a third of 1% of the value of the assets, and they are in the maintenance and education program with the same fees. $495 at the bottom is wrong, it's $595. But at the end, because they haven't really indicated that they're fully committed to the planning the way we do it, then the settlement and administration costs is flexible based on a sliding scale. So just hold on a second. Miss? All right. So this is the practice evolver, and it's important for people to understand that this is the basis for what our practice actually, how our practice actually works. The counseling and design fees that we provide a cash flow up front for the law practice, but because of the way we do things, there is we spend a lot more time preparing and counseling with our clients. We have to do a lot more detail work. There are a lot more meetings with the clients. So, you know, we get essentially what happens is that we have fewer clients with better relationships, but not necessarily more dollars because we have fewer clients. So then there's the maintenance program, and fundamentally that's priced to cover the overhead of the maintenance program and the people that actually maintain it, and it's priced to encourage participation by the families and the helpers. It tends to reduce stress by the attorneys because we're able to update people's documents on a regular basis. We don't worry about somebody who hasn't been in for a while and we know there's a problem. It assures the team of a position through client services performance that they know that they've got a regular job here because of a state settlement and that it's going to be done. It also encourages client referrals, and it encourages our clients to hire us for the estate settlement. And then, of course, finally, there's the estate settlement, which we do. It's profitable at a lower level. Thank you. It does provide some predictability of profit for estate settlement. It allows us it also helps because we have this regular cash flow. It helps with providing for business succession, getting other attorneys to come in and take over the program and help our clients with their planning and their estate settlement and the training and everything. So that's the practice evolver, and that's basically how our practice works. And so that's really a key important factor for people to understand and understanding how the three-step strategy works. I'm not going to go into the Heritage Design cost control system at the moment because we're getting close to running out of time. But essentially, that's a full disclosure of all various different fees that people will encounter when they're doing their plan with us over time, including maintenance fees, estate settlement, and all that kind of stuff. That's what we go through with clients when we're actually talking about the engagement letter. So, and then the third part of appropriate assistance is true peace of mind. Essentially, what people want to know, are things going to actually go smoothly? And so the real question then is, we need to ask, are we the ones that are the people should hire, that the family is going to want to hire by age, experience, personality, and values? And then, of course, there's the question of, are you the ones? Will you make the necessary commitments to actually participate in the maintenance program? And will you honor the process? Remember, it's really important for you to understand that there is a process. It's really easy for people to get caught up in questioning everything or not understanding what's going on and wanting to do everything at once. So it's really important to honor the process and right from the beginning in terms of the maintenance program as well as the state settlement. So all of these are questions that are important for people to decide whether they're going to work with us. So that's the three-step strategy, and that's essentially how we deal with the question of making plans work, because otherwise we think without these various different elements, we don't think the state plans will work. And we've seen lots of experience, had lots of experience with plans that are out of date and not maintained, and it becomes kind of a nightmare for people. So now we get to the interesting part of the werewolf workshop, and I want to tell you that this is a story that was developed by Rick Randall, who is the founder of, who's the chairman of the network, and it's really designed to kind of explain the role of people who are helpers and in a state settlement. So typically what happens when we present this in a group is we ask, okay, how do you like horror stories? And a lot of the older people will say, well, no, I don't really like that. I don't like the slasher movies and that kind of thing. But then if we ask them, well, you know, what about Frankenstein and you know, those old movies? And people say, yeah, I remember those things. And some of them like them, some of them didn't, but at least they were familiar with them. So we asked them if they were familiar. Most people say they are yes. And then we asked them the key question, which is, how would you like to star in one? So what does that mean? How would you like to star in one? Well, first of all, let's talk about what the werewolf movie is typically about. You know, we start off, we get a background, we've got the character that we meet, they are somewhere, we get to know them a little bit and know their acquaintance. They're going to be somewhere, they're going to travel somewhere. There's a setting for where everything is, and then there's the storyline. And you know, the storyline goes something like this. You know, the hero of the story is traveling, or he's going around, and he's meeting a lot of people, or you know, he or she is going about their life. And then all of a sudden there's an attack. They get attacked by a werewolf. They get bitten. And you know, that's the key event. And after the attack, there's the cast of characters. They're, of course, without the survivors, meaning the person that's been bitten, there is no movie, of course. So the person who's bitten by the werewolf has to survive the attack. And in typical fashion, most of these movies have somebody that we would describe as the friend who knows. That's the friend who knows what it means that they've been bitten by this werewolf. They know that there are werewolves actually exist. They know everything that happens. They understand how it works, and they might know it because they were reading a book that fell off a shelf and they found out about werewolves, or they may be familiar with the occult, whatever it may be, but there's a friend that knows what's happening to the hero or heroine of the movie. Then there's the advisors. These are the scientists and the officials who are giving advice. You know, the survivor goes to them for help and they say, there's no such thing as a werewolf. What are you talking about? And so, you know, we get all these people who give poor advice to the survivor. It doesn't really work, and they don't believe that there's such a thing as a werewolf, and they're not very helpful. And then finally, there's always a love story. There's someone who really cares about the survivor, about the surviving victim of the werewolf attack. Someone who cares about them. You know, a lot of the beginning of the movie is about the beginning of their relationship and that kind of thing. So there's always a loved one involved in the cast. So the question is, how do you kill a werewolf? And when this gets asked in audiences, a lot of times what happens is people will say, you drive a stake through their heart. Well, no, that's not it. Those are vampires. And that, you know, usually that's the answer. and so we can see that vampires have marketed themselves a lot better than werewolves. But no, it's really a silver bullet. Somebody has to shoot a silver bullet, and if we ask who it was that shoots the silver bullet, sometimes in the back of the room somebody says the Lone Ranger. Well, yes, the Lone Ranger had a silver bullet, but it's really a silver bullet. It has to be fired at the werewolf to kill the werewolf. And so, you know, that's the story. Who is it that actually fires that bullet? Well, that is usually the loved one, the one that's the romantic lead, the romantic partner of the victim of the werewolf attack. They're the ones that have to shoot the silver bullet. So now you're asking me, you're probably wondering exactly what does all this mean in relationship to estate settlement. So let's go back and talk about our background and storyline. So, you know, in our situation, what happens is that somebody dies. They've been going along fine, but suddenly they die. And so, you know, we have the family and we have our storyline and all that stuff. And the attack is the death of the client. And, you know, that's the key aspect of what we're talking about. So who are our cast of characters? Well, there's the survivor, and we're mostly often concerned with the surviving spouse who is going through this really difficult period of adjusting. They go through various different stages of recovery, of grieving, and you know, they go through stages of anger and resignation, a whole bunch of different stages, and they're the survivor. They're the ones that are going through this whole process. Then there's the friend who knows, and typically that is us. We're the lawyer. We know what the process is. We know how it works, and we're trying to shepherd the survivor and the family along through the process. The problem is that there's also advisors, and you know, the survivor and the family will go and talk to the advisors, and the advisors aren't scientists. It's just about anybody that they can talk to, and they'll get information or advice about what the estate settlement process is supposed to look like. But you know, we have the story of Betty from the Burger King, who typically goes to the Burger King. She's retired and she gets a cup of coffee and she holds forth at the Burger King, and people go there and visit her. And Betty knows everything about everything. Well, she doesn't know everything about everything. She has lots of conviction, but not a lot of knowledge. A lot of confidence in what she knows, but not a lot of knowledge actually. So she will give out advice of any kind, and she'll claim to know all about whatever is happening. And that's the advisor that our survivor and their family run into and get confused. So that's what happens. And then finally, there's the loved ones. And that typically is the family. And you know, the survivor in our story is the werewolf. And so what happens is that they get really angry, and oftentimes they take it out on the friend who knows, that's trying to guide them through the process of estate settlement. And that's a very typical response. It's a very understandable response. There's a lot of anger involved in the loss of a loved one, and it has to go somewhere. So oftentimes it's the law firm that's trying to guide the survivor through this process that becomes the brunt of their anger. And so what we rely on is the loved ones, and the loved ones are actually going to, and they're not going to kill the survivor, they're going to turn the werewolf into someone who is more reasonable and understanding, and remind them that, you know, they went through all of this planning, they went through all of this maintenance to establish this process, that the decedent actually had this process and all these goals and objectives that they wanted to meet. And you know, remind them that the process is designed for them, it's designed to help them, and you know, that is the role of the helper in essence, because a lot of times the survivor is going through a lot and they just can't concentrate on the kinds of things that we are talking about. So they need someone to be there to support them. They need someone to be there to help them and to keep them guided along the path to follow the process. So what does that take? You know, that takes a lot of advanced preparation, and that's why we have the maintenance program and the training and all of that. And it also requires that people have proper expectations about what's going to happen, because if you don't really have any knowledge of what's going to happen in the state settlement, you don't really know what to expect, and you're going to go to the other advisors, people that you meet in the community. I'm not talking about financial advisors. I'm just talking about people that you meet in the community who are going to get people confused. And so it's important for people to have proper expectations about what's actually going to happen in the estate settlement process, what the fees are supposed to look like, and how it's all supposed to work, and what they're going to end up with. Because, of course, the first question that most people think about when they go to an estate settlement meeting is, how much do I get and when do I get it? Well, that's actually a typical question, but hopefully when people are educated and they understand, they know when they're going to get it, they understand what they're going to get, and that question doesn't become a big argumentative point at the beginning. So proper expectations are key to the whole estate settlement process, and that way we can control the werewolf behavior. So that is our trustee training workshop. We hope that that you've liked it. So let me just review again. You know, it's not about the documents, it's about the value and therefore the fees that and it's all based on the counseling. You know, there is the parking lot rule. You're going to we're going to finish this, and gradually over time, even as you're headed for your bedroom or wherever it might be, you're going to begin to lose some of this information, and that's why we have the website. That's why you can go there and refresh your memory, and you can tell your helpers who are not able to attend today that they can go to the website and get the information, download the program. Doesn't take long to go through it, and we actually have gone pretty timely tonight, so it's about an hour. So we have 4 goals. Again, it's important for people to know the name of the law firm and the contact information. Remember that there's a process, and the process produces the results, so we need to follow it. We want to give you an idea of the types of issues that you'll deal with through our training workshops. And we want to encourage interest in the planning participation by the helpers and the beneficiaries so that everybody is on the same page and understands what to expect. You know, when something happens, when 911, when it's time to make that 911 call, first thing to do is to call the law firm, locate the client's blue book, and you know, the hard copy. We have a lot of those materials on our website at the Resource Center. Locate the client's red book, which is where all the documents are and a lot of the important information, and relax, because there is a dependable process to follow, and you can get a lot of the answers about what you need right up front on the website and the places that I showed you, with common concerns memorandum, and a lot of other information there that you can download and read to help you relax about what's the next step and what's going to happen when we get started. So, are there any questions?
Hi, this is Bob Hickman.
Yeah.
Just wanted to thank you very much.
All right, you're very welcome, Bob. Any questions?
This is Alex. Alex here.
Hi, Alex.
Yeah, hi. Early on, I was trying to get online, so I didn't write down. Can you just give me the website info again?
Sure. It's you go to let me just take you there. You go to heritagedesignlaw.com. Okay.
Yep.
You click on the client sign-in
Mm-hmm.
button. That takes you to a sign-in for a private sign-in. Your username is step 2, initial caps STEP space 2, and the password is member, capital MEMBER. And that takes you to the step 2 resource center, and that's where all of the materials are, right here.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Super, thank you.
Any other
Excellent.
questions? Any other questions? All right, well, I don't hear any questions, so I'm going to conclude the program. I thank you all very much for attending, and I hope to see you at the next session.
Okay. Thank you very much.